Hello, guys and dolls. Welcome back to Conversations with Zelia. I'm your host, Zelia Lorraine. In today's video, we'll recap and review the 2003 movie, The Fine Temptation, starring Beyonce and Cuba Jr. As it follows the story of Darren, recently fired exec who finds himself directing his late aunt's church choir and pretty much the dysfunctions surrounding directing a choir. I hope you enjoy this recap, so let's get started. The movie opens up with two kids, Darren and Lily, with Lily being played by Haley Chloe Bailey, which I did not know for years that it was Chloe. I only found out recently that Chloe Bailey played the kid version of Lily, which is full circle considering the fact Chloe and her sister Haley were discovered by Beyonce. But it opens up with two children, Darren and Lily, chatting with each other, with Lily saying that her husband that she's going to marry Michael Jackson, which, considering the movie, it's interesting she mentioned that because the Michael movie is set to come out this week. Stay tuned for a review on that movie. Before they are escorted back to church, where we are greeted by a choir performance led by Pastor Shirley Caesar and Darren's Aunt Sally. And after the church service, Darren's mother, Mary Ann, is exposed by Pauline, the moralistic church lady, for having a singing career. And despite Aunt Sally trying to come to their defense, the weak-willed pastor pretty much tells Marianne to make a decision: either stop your singing career, or you're being kicked out of church. And Marianne decides to leave the church. And because it's for some reason it's a small town, she decides to move to New York with Aunt Sally saying goodbye. Then we get a time jump to 2002, where Darren is a successful ad executive, but not only that, he's also a habitual liar, since who has a habit of lying, which will come back to bite him later on. Like, literally, when he's on a date with a woman, he lies about his father being Venezuelan, and his card but he winds up getting embarrassed when his card gets rejected. And one day, his paranoid boss decides to do a background check on him and found out that Darren pretty much lied about everything: his education, his qualifications, all of that, which leads to Darren getting fired. And as Darren is leaving with his things, he finds out that his Aunt Sally's passed away, and he pretty much has to go to Georgia to pretty much attend the funeral. And while traveling to Georgia by train, he pretty much reminisces on his mom Marianne, which will show a montage of her performing at nightclubs and young Darren hanging out with older patrons. And we find out that Marianne has since passed away, though we don't find out to the funeral that she died in a car accident when he was a teenager. And while arriving at this little restaurant / cab service, he meets a driver named Lucius, played by Mike Epps, whom he becomes quick friends with. And as they're driving to Georgia, Lucius has a discussion regarding women's bodies, and they wind up catching a glimpse of a woman played by Beyonce, who we find out is Lily. And they wind up picking up Jimmy B. And while they're on their way to the funeral, Jimmy B decides it'll be a great idea to play Tupac's Dear Mama, which Lucius pretty shuts down, saying, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't an appropriate time to play this. this man's auntie is about to be maggot food. And they arrive at the funeral, which everyone, including the tambourine lady and all the other church goers, they wind up attending. And Paulina, she pretty much makes herself the center of attention, overreacting and stuff, which Jimmy B, who's her grandson, chastises her for it. And we're led to believe that Pauline is widowed though we don't find out that wasn't the case till the end. Sorry for spoiling it. And Darren, phone goes off during the funeral, which distracts everyone. He winds up giving a eulogy. Then at the funeral, Darren, since he's Sally's only living relative, decides pretty much sings the praises of Shirley Caesar, who's a well-known gospel legend, by the way. She's a VIP. And talks with Bessie, played by another VIP, Melba Moore, and the tambourine lady. I don't know the lady's name, but I'm going to call her the tambourine lady. And when he asks her about Lily, they all make bad comments about Lily, which we don't find out till why. And then at the reading of the will, the tambourine lady is giving Aunt Sally's recipes, though she gets advice from Aunt Sally to pretty much go half on the cooking grease and the recipes depending on what killed her. Paulina gets left behind her church hats, and Darren is left to the choir director job that Aunt Sally had, which Pauline is big mad about. And she always does this. I forgot the term. And I know this may be the incorrect term, but she always guilt trips her brother into doing her bidding. And he was about to not give the job to Darren until Darren makes a lie about being a producer for a hip hop producer, which everyone instantly believes, and pretty much keeps the chorus job, which pretty much upsets Paulina. And to get how spiteful she is, she literally doesn't even give him a ride and splashes him with water after her car passing him by. And Darren moves into the boarding house, which is owned by Pauline, and she very much has very strict rules there. Such as no smoking, no drinking, no sexual activity, among other things. And then later that night, Darren goes out with Lucius to a nightclub where Lily is performing, and she's performing a sultry version of Fever, and attempts to record her to the church choir by saying that it was Sally's dying wish to do so, even though Sally was in a coma before she passed away, which goes to show you just how strange Darren was to Sally. But she pretty much rebuffs him, and we don't know and threatens to get Dean on him, which we don't know why. We'll find out why in the future, and we won't find out who Dean is till later on. Darren, upon noticing how small the church choir is, decides to get some auditions, and he pretty much promotes them through Steve Harvey's DJ character. But the auditions, they're a bust, which consists of a white Christian duo group, a man that can play various instruments, a rapper, and some bum singing Isn't She Lovely by Stevie Wonder. Then Darren pretty much goes back to his slick ways and pretty much recruits Lucius and other townspeople such as Blanche from the Golden Girls and Angie Stone, may she rest in peace. And they're both VIPs through bribery, by bribing them through money, essentially by namely offering them half of the prize for the big gospel explosion contest, which is not a big contest without it's not a 2000s movie without some big contest or sorts. Like Stump the Yard, they had a big contest at the end. You Got Served, they had a big contest. I'm not sure about Step Up, but literally every 2000s movie that has anything to do with music or dance, they all have some big contests at the end. And then Lily, he winds up bumping into Lily, who's taking her son Dean to the barbershop owned by DOJ's, and they're also VIPs. And Dean is Lily's son through a failed relationship, which explains why she's a pariah in the small town they're in. And Darren successfully gets Lily into the church choir and the OJs into the church crowd, but the old head choir members, they're against her inclusion due to her being a nightclub singer and the fact that she has a son out of wedlock. And he pretty much and the only people that defended Lily's inclusion was Angie Stone, who stated that if Aunt Sally was alive, she would have supported Lily being a choir. And eventually Lily, she gets somewhat upset, though Pauline ends up leaving the church choir in response. And then and pretty much arranges the new choir members, which includes an interracial couple and Jimmy B. A month later, he managed to get the choir members with the information, but he missed the deadline of the gospel explosion thanks to Paulina intentionally sabotaging him by putting the announcements in the girls' bathroom. So, in order to get into the gospel explosion, which is the big gospel music competition, Darren and Lucius, they make a visit to the prison warden, who's also the head of the contest, played by Faison Love, to convince them to get into the competition. But he pretty much allowed the only way he allowed them the competition if they perform for his prisoners and get a good reception, which the performance wanted to be successful thanks to Lily's charm. And Washington allows them in, and Faison Love allows them in to the competition on the condition they add 3 new prisoners, which consists of Montel Jordan, a rapper named T-Bone, and some other dude who doesn't say much and has no lines whatsoever. And the prisoners, they wind up gelling with the choir, but they can't join unless they're baptized, which Paulina enforces. And while the prisoners are baptized, Darren gets baptized too, since Paulina doesn't remember Darren getting baptized. Then we get a montage of the choir becoming successful and Paulina rocking the church hats that was willed to her by Aunt Sally. Then Lily and Darren, they wind up spending some quality time together and they get lovey-dovey. And while they're being lovey-dovey, Paulina enters Darren's phone that he left behind, which was gets a call from his assistant. And she pretty much uses his leverage to expose him at the church fair, telling him that he's not really a rapper, but rather an ad executive. And the reason they want him back is because a liquor company is willing to work for them, which just showed you the stereotype. They only want their black ad executive back because the liquor company is willing to work for him. And everyone gets pissed off at Darren for betraying them, including Lily, which Darren states when asked by Jimmy B's that he only did this for the money, and he states, of course, that's why half of you joined. And yeah, I know I lied, but that's nothing compared to the way y'all treated my mother. And Darren pretty much accepts the job offer and returns to New York, but he pretty much has some sort of culture shock since things are different in New York than the way they are down south. Seeing as he literally had to order, he's ordering from an upscale soul food restaurant that adds feta cheese and their collard greens. Then the next day, Darren, alongside his assistant Rosa in attendance, he makes his presentation about advertising for the liquor company, and while making this presentation, he had glimpses of the characters he interacted with. And as soon as he concludes, he winds up quitting his job and went back to Georgia. And when he arrives at the church, he finds Reverend Paul there, who says that Paulina ghosted him. Paulina took the choir and ghosted him to attend the gospel explosion. And he winds up reconnected with Lily, who got kicked out as soon as Paulina took over. And he, Lily, Lucius, and Reverend Paul decides to drive to the explosion, which Paulina pretty much doesn't take it well that Darren and Darren and Lily's appearance, and pretty much calls Darren out for forfeiting his inheritance by deserting the choir. And Darren winds up unmasking Paulina, where it's revealed that not only did her husband wasn't deceased, but rather he was alive and ditched her for another woman. And then they have a vote where everyone, including the Tamarine lady, Jimmy B, and all the other choir members, vote out Paulina, and Darren gets hired. And pretty much, in there before before the Fine Temptations get on the stage, and this is also set to a montage of various gospel acts like the Blind Boys of Alabama and Mary Mary performing. Darren learns that due to him leaving New York, his inheritance stock went down, which means that they have to win the money for the big prize money for the gospel explosion. And the Five Temptations, they wound up performing, and of course, they win the competition. And as they win the competition, Darren proposes to Lily, and he says yes. And then we get a big time jump where it's real that Darren and Lily are married with a child. And the choir perform one last time, and that is the end of my recap for the Fine Temptations. Now, my thoughts on the movie is it's a decent black movie. It's a great movie, and even though I'm not a big fan of gospel music, I really enjoyed the music in this movie. Beyonce, she did a decent acting job, and Cuban Gooding Jr.'s character was compelling as Darren. And Latanya Richardson Jackson, she did a great job as the Venom Paulina, to the point you love to hate her and despise her. And it's a very nostalgic movie to watch. And overall, I had a good time watching this movie. I hope you enjoyed my recap. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It's been a good time hanging out with you. Until then, bye bye.